The champagne flute hit the marble bar with a sharp crack. 300 people. Chicago's most powerful, the 42nd floor of the Ashby Tower,
Pleasure doing business
and
with you,
Margaret
Conrad.
Calloway stood perfectly still,
Meg. Welcome
8
aboard.
months pregnant, gold dress, dry eyes, because 7 hours earlier, 7 hours, she had just signed the largest private deal this city had seen in 11 years. $900 million, her name on every line, and her husband had no idea. He was right there, drink in hand, laughing with his friends. The man she had loved for 6 years, the man who had just looked at a room full of Chicago's elite and said, with a smile, with a wave of his hand as if she were furniture, "Oh, don't mind Meg. She used to work in finance. Before, maybe." Before, maybe. While her name was already on the wire, while Conrad Ashby, one of the most powerful men in this city, was across the room, knowing exactly who she was, while Vivian Hartwell watched from 12 feet away and went completely still. What Derek Calloway did not know, what none of them knew yet, was that Margaret had not just closed a deal that afternoon. She had closed a chapter, and what she was about to discover about her own husband, the phone call he made, the account she never knew existed, the attorney he visited 14 months ago, would change everything. This is the story of a woman who was written off, and what happened when the world found out who she really was. Lesson statement. Sometimes the people closest to you are the last ones to see you clearly, and the moment they finally do, you have already moved on without them. Meaning plus value. This story is for every woman who has ever made herself smaller to make someone else feel larger. For every woman who has swallowed her own victory in a quiet room. For every woman who has been told, out loud or in silence, that she was before maybe eventually. Margaret's journey is not just about betrayal. It is about the slow, powerful work of remembering who you were before you started apologizing for it. If this story speaks to something you have felt, you have ever sat in a parked car and wondered how you got here, you are not alone. Hit like so more women find this story. Drop a comment telling us the moment you stopped waiting for permission. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you are new here, subscribe, because every week we bring you stories about women who find their way back to themselves. You are exactly where you are supposed to be. Now stay, because this story is just getting started.
The champagne flute hit the marble bar with a sharp crack. Not broken, just set down too hard. Margaret Calloway looked at her own hand and told it to relax. 7:58 in the evening. The Hartwell Foundation Gala, 42nd floor of the Ashby Tower. Chicago, February. Cold enough outside to make the windows sweat, with warmth from within. 300 people in this room. 300 people in black tie and silk, and the particular expression of men and women who have never once in their lives worried about a utility bill. The air smelled of white lilies and something expensive and faintly competitive. The kind of room where the flowers cost more than most people's monthly rent. The kind of room where everyone was performing for everyone else and nobody was quite sure who the audience was. Meg was 8 months pregnant. Her feet hurt. Her lower back had been sending her a very clear message since approximately 4 in the afternoon, and the message was not polite. She was wearing a gold maternity gown that Vivian Hartwell had sent to her hotel suite 2 hours ago. A messenger had arrived with the garment bag and a handwritten card on Hartwell Group stationery. The note said 4 words. "You closed it? Dress like it." Meg had stood in front of the mirror for a long moment after reading that. She had pressed the note flat against her palm. She had looked at herself, 34 years old, round with her daughter, hair pinned up the way Derek always said made her look severe, and she had thought, okay, okay then. She was wearing the gold dress. She was at the party. She was drinking sparkling water from a champagne flute, so nobody would ask her why she wasn't drinking champagne. What she was not doing was telling anyone what had happened 7 hours ago. 7 hours ago, she had been in a conference room on the 31st floor of this same building. Conrad Ashby across the table. Vivienne Hartwell in the corner chair, very still, the way she went still when something important was happening, and she did not want to interrupt it. 3 years of preparation, 36 months of research and proposal drafts and revised projections, and 3 separate rounds of due diligence, 40 minutes of final negotiation, a $900 million strategic partnership agreement between Ashby Global and the Hartwell Group. Her name on the deal memo. Margaret A. Calloway, lead negotiator. Conrad Ashby had stood up when it was done. He had come around the table and shaken her hand with both of his. He was 55 years old and had been doing deals in the city since before she was born, and he had said, "Your wife is extraordinary, Derek. I hope you know that." No. Wait, that was later. That was tonight. 7 hours ago, in the conference room, Conrad had said, "You're the best negotiator I've encountered in 30 years of business." He had said it simply, the way you say something that is just true. Vivian had made a small sound from the corner chair. Something close to pride. Meg had said thank you. She had collected her copy of the signed agreement. She had taken the elevator down to the lobby. She had sat on a marble bench near the revolving doors and put her hand on her stomach and said, very quietly, to nobody, "We did it." Her daughter had kicked. Once, hard, like punctuation. Then Meg had called Derek. She had called him twice from the elevator. He had not answered. She had texted, "Big news." "Can we talk before the party?" He had replied 11 minutes later. She had read the reply 3 times, locked her phone, unlocked it, read it again, locked it, running late. Don't be boring tonight. She was standing at the bar now, thinking about those 5 words, when Derek arrived, 7:45 in the evening. He came through the main entrance with Lawson Briggs, his tie loosened, smelling faintly of scotch, his expression set to the particular frequency of a man who considered himself comfortable in rooms like this. He spotted her immediately and crossed to her with a smile that she had once thought was the most reassuring thing in the world. "You look tired," he said. He kissed her cheek. "Did you do something different with your hair?" "I pinned it up," Meg said. "Ah." He took her sparkling water, looked at it, handed it back. "Where's the real bar?" Lawson Briggs nodded at Meg with the slightly awkward warmth of a man who had never quite figured out how to talk to her. "You look great, Meg," he said. "Thank you, Lawson." Derek was already scanning the room. Meg reached into her small gold clutch. Her phone was there. The deal memo was on her phone. A photograph she had taken of the signed page, her name and Conrad Ashby's name, and the Hartwell Group seal, time-stamped at 3:17 in the afternoon. She did not take the phone out. She pressed her hand flat against the clutch instead. 3 times, lock, unlock, lock. She left it there. Vivian Hartwell was across the room in conversation with Eleanor Marsh and 2 women Meg recognized from the city council. Vivian was 71 years old and wore her age the way some women wear jewelry. Deliberately, with full awareness of its effect. She caught Meg's eye from across the party. She raised her champagne glass 1 millimeter. Meg straightened her spine. The baby shifted, a long, slow roll that pressed against her ribcage. She breathed through it. Hold on, sweetheart, she thought. This night is about to get complicated. Derek returned with a proper scotch and spent the next 12 minutes steering her around the edges of the party. Not obviously, not with his hand on her arm, just with his body, his slight directional pressure, the way he would angle toward a conversation and angle her away from another. She noticed it the way she had been noticing it for 2 years. The way you notice a sound in the walls, present, persistent, and not yet loud enough to name. The third time it happened, she understood where he was steering her away from, Conrad Ashby, who was moving through the room with his wife, greeting people, working his way gradually in their direction. Meg stopped walking. Derek took 2 more steps before he realized she wasn't beside him. He turned. "You okay?" he said. "Fine," she said. "I just want to stay here for a moment." He looked at her. Something moved behind his eyes. Then he smiled and rejoined her just as Conrad Ashby arrived. Conrad was a tall man with gray at his temples and the unhurried manner of someone who had nothing left to prove. He extended both hands toward Meg, and his face opened into genuine warmth. "Margaret," he said, "you look wonderful." "Conrad," she said, "thank you for a remarkable afternoon." Conrad laughed, a real laugh, appreciative and warm. Then he looked at Derek and extended one hand. "You must be incredibly proud," he said. "Your wife is extraordinary, Derek. I hope you know that." Derek shook the hand. He smiled. He put his arm around Meg's shoulders with the ease of a man accepting a compliment about his car. "She's a handful," Derek said pleasantly. "But we keep her." Conrad blinked. "Just once." "Well," Conrad said after a moment, "she's worth keeping." He moved on. His wife gave Meg a small, meaningful look that Meg filed away for later. Derek was already turning toward Lawson, resuming a conversation about a golf weekend. His hand dropped from her shoulder. Meg stood still. "She's a handful, but we keep her," she smiled. The smile cost her something she did not yet have words for. The humiliation happened at 8:12 in the evening. 47 people in the immediate vicinity, at least 12 with phones already in their hands. It began with a conversation Meg had not started and could not have anticipated. Sylvia Calloway, Derek's mother, 64 years old, impeccable in ivory Chanel, a woman who had navigated Chicago society for 40 years with the precision of a surgeon, had gathered a cluster of women near the grand marble staircase. The cluster included Eleanor Marsh, who funded 3 hospital wings, Patricia Langdon, a retired partner from one of the city's oldest law firms, 2 women from the Arts Board, 1 from the mayor's office. They were discussing, of all things, women in business. Eleanor Marsh was saying something genuinely unusual for a woman of her generation and her circles. She was saying, "The most interesting deals in this city for the past 3 years have come from women who had no reason to be at the table, no reason anyone gave them, anyway." The women murmured, agreed, qualified their agreement in the way women of a certain class sometimes do. Eyes drifted, almost involuntarily, toward Meg. She was, after all, impossible not to look at. 8 months pregnant, 34 years old, the youngest woman in the cluster by at least 15 years, wearing a gold dress that Vivian Hartwell had selected with deliberate intent. She was also, in that room, the only person who had spent the afternoon in a conference room on the 31st floor with Conrad Ashby. Not that anyone knew that yet. Meg opened her mouth. She had something to say. She had earned something to say. Derek spoke first. "Oh, don't mind Meg," he said pleasantly. He was addressing the group with the ease of a man who assumed his voice was the one people were waiting for. "She's been on bed rest, Brain. You know how pregnancy gets. They sort of check out of the real world for a while. Nesting mode. He looked at her. He smiled. The smile was warm and possessive, and entirely unconscious of itself. She used to work in finance, actually, he said. Before. She'll get back to it eventually. A small pause. Maybe. Silence. Not the polite, transitional silence of a conversation finding its next direction. The thick, specific silence of a room deciding what to do with what it has just witnessed. Eleanor Marsh blinked. Once. Vivian Hartwell, 12 feet away, went completely still. Paige Thornton, Meg's best friend, 33, who had been holding a champagne flute for 40 minutes without drinking from it, set the glass down on the nearest surface with a sound like a period at the end of a sentence. Lawson Briggs looked at his shoes. Sylvia Calloway smiled the careful smile of a woman who had heard something she found satisfying and was too practiced to show it. Meg did not move. She was aware of her own heartbeat. It was very steady. The baby had gone still, as if listening. The room was still. Derek was already pivoting, already moving his body toward Lawson, his back half turning. The conversation apparently concluded in his mind. She used to work in finance. Before, maybe. Her hands were at her sides. The gold dress caught the chandelier light. She was aware of every person in her peripheral vision and the specific quality of their attention. He just erased me, she thought. In front of Eleanor Marsh, in front of Vivian, in front of Conrad Ashby's wife. He just wrote me out of my own story, past tense, before, maybe, like I'm already gone. She excused herself. She said it quietly, and to no one in particular. She turned and walked. Not quickly, not in distress. With her spine straight and her chin level and the gold dress moving around her like she had chosen it for exactly this moment, which she thought she had. She walked to the terrace. The glass doors opened onto a narrow ledge of space above the Chicago skyline, enclosed by floor-to-ceiling windows on 3 sides. February cold, even with the glass between her and the city. The lights of the buildings stretched out in every direction, white and gold and red. She pressed her palm flat against the window. The glass was cold. Her reflection looked back at her. Gold dress, round belly, completely dry eyes. She thought, 7 hours ago I was the most important person in a room full of the most important people in this city. 7 hours ago, Conrad Ashby shook my hand and said I was the best negotiator he had encountered in 30 years of business. 7 hours ago, Vivian made that sound, that small, particular sound she makes when something has gone exactly right. 7 hours ago. She reached into her clutch, took out her phone. The deal memo was there, time-stamped 3:17 in the afternoon. Her name, lead negotiator. She looked at it for a long moment. She put the phone away. Behind her, through the glass door, she could hear the party continuing, the particular hum of 300 people who had already decided that what they'd witnessed was not their business. And then she heard Sylvia Calloway's voice, carrying with the precision of long practice. Derek worries about her. The pregnancy has been hard. She's not quite herself. Meg looked at her reflection. I'm exactly myself, she thought. That is precisely the problem. A movement beside her. Someone had followed her to the terrace. Not Derek, not Vivian. An older woman, silver hair, cropped close. A face Meg did not recognize, which in a room where she knew most people was unusual. The woman stood beside her at the window and looked out at the city for a moment. Then she said, without turning, whatever he thinks he just did, it's going to cost him more than he knows. She walked away before Meg could respond. Meg stood at the window. The city went on forever below her. The lake was invisible in the dark, but she knew it was there. That vast cold expanse, just beyond the grid of lights. patient and enormous. She took a breath. She went back inside. She found Vivian Hartwell near the bar and stood beside her and accepted a fresh glass of sparkling water. They did not speak for a moment. Then Vivian said, very quietly, without looking at her, "You don't have to stay." "I know," Meg said, "but you're going to." "Yes." Vivian made a small sound, approval, or something close to it. Meg stayed for 40 more minutes. She spoke to Eleanor Marsh. She spoke to Conrad Ashby's wife, whose name was Diane, and who turned out to be a former civil rights attorney, and who said, when they parted, "I'll look forward to following your work." She spoke to 2 board members of foundations she had been quietly hoping to connect with for a year. She did not speak to Derek again until they were in the car. The car arrived at 9:45. Derek held the door. He was not visibly drunk, which was something. He was in the particular mood of a man who considered the evening a success. Meg got in. She looked out the window. The city moved past. Derek said something about the salmon being dry. He said something about Lawson's plan for the golf weekend. He reached for her hand. She looked out the window. He fell asleep before they reached Michigan Avenue. Meg watched his sleeping face in the moving dark. "I'm not imagining this," she thought. "I know what I saw. I know what I heard. I know what it means. I've always known." The car pulled into the parking garage at 10:19. The driver said goodnight. Derek woke up, stretched, kissed Meg's temple in the automatic way of a man running a well-practiced routine, and went upstairs ahead of her. "Don't be long," he said, already at the elevator. Meg told him she needed a moment. The elevator doors closed. She sat in the parked car. The garage was underground and utterly quiet. The fluorescent lights hummed at a frequency she had never noticed before. One of them flickered, once, twice, then steadied. The engine ticked as it cooled, the smell of cold concrete and motor oil. She had one hand on her stomach, one hand on the door handle. She did not move. She let the quiet be there. She let the dark be there. She let the particular exhaustion of an evening like this. The performance of being fine, the sustained work of holding herself together in a room full of people. She let all of it be present without trying to resolve it. The baby moved, slow and deep, like someone turning over in sleep. "I know," Meg said, to the empty car, to the garage, to her daughter. "I know." She sat for 11 minutes. Then she went upstairs. Derek was already in bed. She could hear his breathing from the hallway. She changed in the bathroom. She put the gold dress on the hanger Vivian's messenger had included, because it was not her dress, and it deserved to be treated properly. She washed her face. She looked at herself in the bright bathroom light for a moment. No makeup now, hair down, t-shirt and soft pants, enormous with her daughter. She went to her home office. Derek called it Meg's Corner. The room was the smallest bedroom in their apartment, the one that had technically been designated as a nursery before Meg had quietly occupied it with her files and her laptop, and the 2 diplomas that had been sitting in a drawer for 4 years. The room smelled of old paper and her particular brand of hand lotion, and something that was just hers, some quality of air that only she had breathed in here regularly. She opened her laptop. The screen lit up, and there it was. The Hartwell Group press release had gone live at 9 p.m. Conrad Ashby's communications team had moved quickly, which was their reputation. The Chicago Business Wire had it. 3 financial news feeds had it. The Tribune's business desk was running a digital brief. The Sun-Times had a summary. Ashby Global announces $900 million strategic partnership with Hartwell Group. Her name was in the second paragraph of every version. Margaret A. Calloway, senior associate and lead negotiator for the Hartwell Group, finalized terms of the landmark agreement following 36 months of development. Margaret A. Calloway. Her phone was on the desk. She had turned it to silent at the gala. She picked it up now and looked at the screen. 12 messages from numbers she did not recognize. 4 missed calls from Vivian, 2 from Conrad, 1 from Thomas Weller, the Hartwell Group's lead attorney, which had never happened before in the 4 years she had worked with Vivian. A voicemail from her mother, who was in Florida, and who did not typically call after 9 p.m., and a text from Paige, sent at 9:03. Meg, baby, your name is everywhere. I'm looking at it right now on my phone in a parking lot, and I am literally crying. Ugly crying, the kind with snot. I am so proud of you, I can barely breathe. Also, Derek is going to have a stroke when he finds out, and I want to be there for that. Call me. Meg read the text twice. Then she put the phone face down on the desk and sat in the dark for a moment. She could hear Derek breathing down the hall. She turned off her desk lamp. She sat in the dark. And then the memories came, the way they always do when the mind finally has enough quiet to let them through. Their first apartment, Rogers Park, 6 years ago. She had been 28 and already building the preliminary research that would eventually catch Vivian Hartwell's attention. A long-form analysis of Chicago's infrastructure gap and private sector opportunity that she had written in her own time, on her own laptop, submitting it to 2 industry journals under her own name. Derek had been proud of her then. He had told everyone at his firm's holiday party that his girlfriend was the smartest person in the room. He had kept his hand on the small of her back and said it with a light in his eyes that she had believed completely was love. She had believed it. The memory shifted. 3 years in. She had been passed over for a promotion at her then employer. Fairly, she had told herself, she had not been ready. And she had come home and told Derek. He had listened. He had been quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Maybe this is a sign. My mother never worked. She's the happiest person I know." She had laughed it off. The memory shifted again. Her first Hartwell Group meeting. She had been invited by Vivian personally, a 3-hour session in a conference room that had changed the direction of everything. She had come home that evening, excited, hands moving when she talked, words coming quickly, voice pitched a half octave higher than usual, because she could not fully contain it. Derek had been at the dinner table with his phone. She had talked for 8 minutes. She had told him about Vivian's feeble vision, about the scope of what was being built, about the specific thing Vivian had said that had made Meg understand this was the work she had been building toward. When she stopped talking, there had been a beat of silence. Then Derek said, "Should I get the salmon or the chicken for the Henderson dinner?" She had pivoted. She had answered the question. She had put her excitement away, like something she would come back to later. She had never come back to it, not with him. I thought that was normal, she thought now, in the dark office. I thought that was just how it worked, that his world was the main channel and mine was the one you switched to when nothing else was on. I made that okay. I kept making it okay. I was so tired of making it okay. She opened the laptop again. She looked at her name on the Chicago Business Wire for a long time. Then she opened a new document on her laptop and started a list. She always made lists when she needed to think clearly. Legal pad when she was at the office. Laptop at home. What I know. She typed for a while. What I don't know. She typed for a while. What I do next. She looked at that third column for a moment. Then she typed one word. Wait. She saved the document. She closed the laptop. The room went dark. The baby was still. The apartment was quiet. From down the hall, Derek's steady breathing continued. Undisturbed, her phone lit up once more. A number she did not recognize. A text with no greeting. Mrs. Calloway. You should ask your husband where he was at 3:30 this afternoon, before you say anything to anyone. Meg read it 3 times. She put the phone face down. She sat in the dark for a very long time. She did not sleep. She lay in bed beside Derek from midnight until 5 in the morning, listening to him breathe, looking at the ceiling. At 5:15, she gave up. She made coffee. She sat at the kitchen table as the city lightened outside the windows, gray first, then pink, then the particular flat white of a February morning with cloud cover. At 6 a.m., she called Thomas Weller. He answered on the second ring, the sound of someone already awake and already working. "Margaret," he said, "I'm glad you called. There's something you need to know." She wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. "Tell me," she said. Thomas was a careful man. He was 50 years old and had been practicing business and corporate law for 25 years, and he had the habit of all careful lawyers, saying exactly what he knew and precisely nothing beyond it. He spoke for 3 minutes. When he was done, Meg sat with the phone against her ear and looked at the kitchen window. The city was out there, ordinary, going about its morning. She asked Thomas to say the specific part again. He did. She set her coffee mug down. She reached for the water glass. She drank half of it. She set it down. "He made the call while I was in the room," she said. "Yes," Thomas said, "while I was signing." The timestamp on the call, according to Mr. Holloway, was 3:45. Your signing was completed at 3:17. He tried to kill a deal I had already closed. "He didn't know you had closed it," Thomas said. "The call was made before he had reason to know." "He didn't know," Meg repeated. "No." She understood then that the phrase "didn't know" was doing a great deal of work in that sentence. Derek had not known the deal was closed. He had not known she was in the room at that moment, across a conference table from Conrad Ashby, turning 36 months of her life into $900 million. He had made the call at 3:45 because he had been trying to stop something he believed was still stoppable. He had been watching her work for 3 years, and he had believed at 3:45 on a Thursday afternoon that he still had time to stop it. "Who is Frank Holloway?" Meg said. "Business journalist, Tribune. He's been covering the Ashby Global beat for 11 years. He received a call from a number registered to Derek Calloway at 3:45. The call lasted 9 minutes. Mr. Holloway was given what he was told was background information casting doubt on the Hartwell Group's negotiating position and on the professional credentials of the lead negotiator. My professional credentials. You were not named directly. You were described in sufficient detail that identification would have been elementary to anyone familiar with the Hartwell Group, and Holloway sat on it. When the deal went public at 9 p.m., the story became unpublishable, Thomas said. He called me at 10:30. He wanted the Hartwell Group to know before he decided what to do with the information. Meg was quiet. "Margaret," Thomas said, "I want to be clear about something. The deal is done. It is signed. It is public. Whatever Derek intended, it had no effect on the outcome." "I know," she said. "This is separate from the business matter." "I know that too," she said. She thanked him. She said she would call him later. She set the phone down on the table. The coffee had gone cold. She looked at it. Bitter, probably, by now. She didn't drink it. He knew enough to make the call, she thought. He knew enough to call a journalist and describe me in enough detail to be identified. He knew I was working on something real. He knew it was getting somewhere, and he picked up the phone and tried to stop it. Not because he wanted to hurt me, because he needed me not to be this. He needed me to still be the woman he could keep. She heard Derek's alarm go off down the hall. 7:15. She heard him move. The bathroom, the shower. She sat at the kitchen table and waited. He came downstairs at 7:35, cheerful, unknowing. He kissed the top of her head and went to the coffee maker. He poured a cup. He picked up his phone from the counter. She watched his face. She had decided, in the early gray hours of the morning, that she was not going to tell him what she knew. Not today, not this morning. She was going to watch him. She was going to see who he was when he believed he still had the advantage. His thumb moved across the screen, stopped, moved again. The coffee cup made a small sound as he set it on the counter. Controlled, careful. He looked up. His face had arranged itself into something resembling pride. It was not a perfect arrangement. There were things behind it that pride did not quite cover. "Hey," he said, "apparently your Hartwell thing made the news." "Did it?" Meg said. 900 million. He shook his head slowly. "That's... wow. I had no idea it was that big." "Didn't you?" she said. He didn't hear the difference. "Why didn't you tell me?" he said. There was something in his voice. Not accusation, but something like it. Something that was trying to sound like wounded surprise. "I called you twice," Meg said. "And texted." Right, I was running late." He looked at his phone again, then he picked it up and called his mother. She could hear Sylvia's voice from across the kitchen, crisp and carrying. "Well, Derek, that's wonderful. Your wife certainly is. Resourceful." Derek was nodding. He was performing a pride she recognized now for what it was. The performance of a man who needed to be the one who had always believed in her, now that believing in her cost him nothing. Meg got up. She rinsed her coffee cup. She put it on the rack. She walked out of the kitchen. At 9 a.m., Paige arrived with a paper bag of pastries and barely contained fury in every line of her body. Paige Thornton had been Meg's best friend since graduate school. She was 33 and worked in nonprofit development and had the particular gift of people who truly cannot hide what they feel. Everything showed up immediately, on her face and in her hands and in the speed at which she was moving, right now, through Meg's front door. $900 million, Paige said, before she had set the pastry bag down. "Your name." "Everywhere. I cried in 2 different parking lots last night." She hugged Meg, hard and long, the way people hug when they mean it. Then she stepped back. She looked at Meg's face. "Tell me," Paige said. Meg told her. Not about Thomas, not about the journalist, not yet. She told her about the gala. Derek's words, the particular silence that followed. Paige listened, with the stillness she only achieved when she was genuinely controlling herself. When Meg finished, Paige was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I need to tell you something I should have told you a long time ago." Meg looked at her. "He's been telling people you're a charity project," Paige said. "For at least a year, maybe longer, that Vivian took you on out of sympathy, not merit. That the Hartwell stuff was a hobby she was indulging." She met Meg's eyes directly. "I heard it from 3 different people in the last 8 months. I kept waiting for the right time. There was never a right time." Meg was quiet. "He said that," she said finally, "to our friends. Yes?" "For a year. At least." Meg became aware that Derek was in the hallway. She did not know how long he had been there. She did not turn around. She heard his presence, the way you hear weather. A change in the quality of the air. Paige was looking past Meg's shoulder. Her face had gone very still. "Paige," Derek said. His voice was even. "That's a pretty serious thing to say about someone." "It's a pretty serious thing to do," Paige said. Silence. Meg picked up a pastry from the bag. She took a bite. The almond cream was very good. She chewed it slowly. Her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Conrad Ashby. Personal cell. She answered it. "Excuse me," she said to no one in particular, and walked down the hall to her office. The door clicked shut behind her. "Conrad," she said. "Margaret." His voice was the same as it had been yesterday afternoon, measured, present, giving the conversation its full weight. "I want to apologize for calling on a Saturday morning. I considered whether to wait until Monday. I decided not to." "I'm glad you didn't," she said. "I need to tell you something that Frank Holloway told me when he called last night." She sat down at her desk. The city was gray and flat through the window. The baby was very still. "I already know," she said. A pause. "Thomas Weller called me this morning," she said. "Oh," Conrad said. "Good. Then I'll only add this." Another pause. The particular pause of a man choosing his words with full awareness of their weight. "I want you to know that the call had no effect. The deal was complete. My confidence in you has never wavered. The opposite is true. I have been in this business for 30 years, and I have rarely encountered someone who combines that level of analytical precision with genuine human intelligence the way you do." Meg closed her eyes briefly. "The reason I am calling," Conrad continued, "is not to discuss the deal. The deal is finished, and it is excellent. The reason I am calling is because you're about to have a baby, and I believe you deserve to make informed decisions about your personal situation. I thought that was more important than professional discretion." "Thank you," she said. "I mean that. I know you do." A beat. "We'll speak on Monday about the next phase. Take the weekend." He ended the call. Meg sat with the phones in her hand for a moment. Then her body made a decision her mind had been postponing. The first contraction came quietly, not dramatic, just a tightening across her entire middle, low and insistent, that did not resolve the way the practice ones did. She breathed through it. She checked the time. She waited. 4 minutes later, the second one came. She called Dr. Ann Fielding. "Doctor." Fielding answered on the second ring and listened without interrupting as Meg described the timing and intensity. Then she said, with the calm of someone who has heard this particular description before, "I need you to come in, now, please. Not the emergency entrance. Call ahead, and they'll have a room ready." "Is it labor?" Meg asked. "Probably not at this stage, but we're not taking chances at 36 weeks. Call me when you're in the car." Meg opened the office door. Derek and Paige were in the kitchen, not speaking. They both looked up. "I need to go to the hospital," Meg said. The quality of silence that followed was different from every other silence that morning. Derek drove. He was very focused and very quiet, and she could feel the shift in him. The fear taking over from everything else, clarifying him in the way that fear sometimes does. He ran one red light. She did not comment on it. At Northwestern Memorial, she was in a private room within 20 minutes. Monitors attached. Dr. Fielding present, professional and steady. The verdict: stress response contractions. Braxton Hicks, but severe and close together. The baby was fine. Her blood pressure was elevated. She needed to stay still for 6 hours minimum, not labor, but close enough that nobody was smiling. Derek sat in the waiting area. He had tried to come in. She had asked the nurse to tell him she needed to rest. She needed to be alone. The room was pale gray and very clean. The fetal monitor made its steady sound. The baby's heartbeat, fast and certain, a rhythm that said, "Here, here, here, here." The February sky through the window was the color of old newsprint. Meg lay in the dark and cried. Not the performed kind. Not the kind you do because someone is watching. The kind that comes up from somewhere below thought, from the body's own accounting of what it has been asked to carry, quiet and steady and not quite controllable. She cried into the pillow so that the nurse checking on her would not have to witness it. She thought, I am 34 years old. I am 8 months pregnant with my daughter. Yesterday afternoon, I closed the largest deal of my career. Last night, my husband told a room full of Chicago's most powerful people that I used to work in finance. Before, maybe. This morning, I learned he called a journalist to destroy my professional reputation while I was in the room signing the contract. I am lying in a hospital bed because my body finally said, enough. He didn't want me to be this. He wanted me to stay small enough to need him. And I am in a hospital bed because I couldn't stop myself from becoming large. She cried until the crying was finished. Then she lay in the dark and listened to her daughter's heartbeat on the monitor and felt, beneath the exhaustion and the grief, something else, something smaller and newer, here, 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 here. I know, Meg said to her daughter, to the room. I know, hold on. She asked the nurse to turn off the overhead light. She lay in near dark and put both hands flat on her stomach. The baby moved. That slow, deep roll, unhurried and certain. Meg closed her eyes. She was still there when the knock came. Vivian Hartwell did not wait for an answer. She opened the door and came in with the certainty of a woman who has never once in her life waited for permission she was confident of receiving. She sat in the chair beside the bed and said nothing for a long moment. She took Meg's hand. They sat, like that, in the dim room with the fetal monitor keeping its steady time. I should have said this before tonight became necessary, Vivian said. Her voice was quiet and entirely direct. I chose you 3 years ago because your mind is extraordinary. Not to be kind to you, not because I had extra room in my organization, because you are extraordinary. I want that to be in your body, and not only in your head. Meg nodded. Vivian held her hand for another moment. Then she said, He's been asking questions about your contract with us. Twice in the past year. His assistant called our legal department. Meg was quiet. He was trying to find out what he could control, Vivian said. Whether there was a mechanism by which he could remove you from the work. There wasn't. There isn't. But he was looking. He was building an exit and a cage. At the same time, Meg said. Yes, Vivian said. That's a precise way to describe it. They sat for a moment in the clean quiet of the hospital room. I wasn't paranoid, Meg thought. I wasn't making it bigger than it was. Every time I felt that undercurrent, every redirected conversation, every minimized achievement, every time he told me I was tired when I was actually just thinking. I was reading something real. I was reading him correctly all along. I just kept deciding I was wrong. I was never wrong. Vivian squeezed her hand once and stood. I'll be in the building, she said. I'm not going anywhere. She left. At 3 in the afternoon, Thomas Weller arrived. He was carrying a sealed envelope. He sat down in the chair Vivian had occupied and set the envelope on the bedside table without opening it. When you're ready, he said. Not tonight, but soon there are things here you'll want to see. What kind of things? Meg said. The kind that will help you make informed decisions, he said, about your next steps. He left the envelope. He left. Meg looked at the envelope on the bedside table for a long time. She did not open it. She put her hands on her stomach and listened to her daughter's heartbeat. Here, 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 here. She was discharged on Sunday morning. Derek drove her home. He was gentle in the way men sometimes become when they have been frightened enough. Not a restored tenderness, but a careful one, a tenderness that was mostly about managing his own anxiety. He carried her bag. He held the elevator. He made her tea without being asked and set it on the end table beside the couch with a look on his face that she recognized as the expression of a man who believed that if he did enough of the right things in quick enough succession, the situation would return to normal. She said, "Thank you for the tea." She did not open the envelope. Not that day. She let 3 days pass. She let Derek's careful attentiveness run its course. She watched it become, gradually, less careful. The third evening, he was back on his phone at dinner. The fourth evening, he mentioned the golf weekend again. The fifth morning, he said something about her working from home being a good time to get ahead on the nursery. On the third morning, she went to her office, closed the door, and opened the envelope. Thomas had included a cover letter. 1 page, single-spaced, divided into 3 numbered sections. He was a careful man, and this was a careful document. Section 1. Derek had, on 2 occasions during the Hartwell deal negotiations, shared internal timeline information with a competing firm, information he had obtained by accessing Meg's home office files while she was at prenatal appointments. The information sharing did not rise to the level of actionable breach, but Thomas had documented it. 2 instances, dates included. Section 2. A joint bank account had been opened 26 months ago in Derek's name and Meg's name, though Meg had never been informed of its existence and had never signed any documentation relating to it. The account had been receiving automatic transfers from their household accounts. Small, irregular amounts ranging from $300 to $800 for 31 months. The cumulative total was not catastrophic, but the intent it represented was. Section 3. 14 months ago, Derek had consulted a divorce attorney, a partner at a mid-size family law firm on the north side. The consultation had lasted 90 minutes. He had not retained the attorney. He had not filed, but he had gone. Meg read the document twice. Then she sat back in her chair and looked at the ceiling. He was building an exit, she thought, while building a cage. He was collecting information to use against me while collecting money to fund his departure. He went to a divorce attorney 14 months ago, which means that 14 months ago he was already thinking about what his life looked like without me in it, while I was growing his daughter, and then I closed the $900 million deal, and he panicked because the cage wasn't working anymore. She called Thomas Weller and asked him for a referral to a family attorney. She did not tell Derek. She spent the rest of that morning making calls. Vivian first. She accepted the senior partnership offer formally, the one that had been waiting on the table since the deal closed. She had been deferring it. She understood now that she had been deferring it specifically because some part of her knew what Derek's reaction would be and had been trying to protect the peace. She accepted the partnership. Then she called her bank and opened a personal account. She moved nothing into it yet. She simply opened it. Her name alone on a document attached to a number that was hers and only hers. That afternoon, she rearranged her home office. She took Derek's golf magazines off the shelf where they had accumulated, inexplicably, over the past 2 years. She stacked them outside the office door. She moved her files to the primary shelves. She opened the bottom drawer of her desk, the deep one she had been using for storage since they moved in, and took out 2 frames, her diplomas. They had been in that drawer, unframed and unprotected, for 4 years. She hung them on the wall behind her desk. Centered, level. She stepped back and looked at them. Margaret A. Calloway. Bachelor of Science, Finance summa cum laude. Margaret A. Calloway. Master of Business Administration. The room was quiet. The city moved outside the window. Downstairs, she could hear the television. Derek, watching something, the familiar cadence of it. She had heard that sound so many times she had stopped hearing it. She heard it now. This is the most peaceful I have felt in 3 years, she thought. I am standing in my home office at 9 in the evening, hanging my own diplomas on my own wall while my husband watches television downstairs. And I feel peaceful. Not happy. Not resolved, but peaceful. What does that mean? It means I've been fighting the wrong battle, she thought. The battle was never out there. The battle was always in here, whether I was allowed to take up space, whether I was allowed to be this. I am allowed. I always was. She took a photograph of the diplomas on her phone. She did not post it anywhere. She just looked at it for a long time. Her name twice, in the same clean institutional font, Margaret A. Calloway. She saved the photo and put her phone in her pocket. She had work to do. Lawson Briggs called on a Wednesday. He asked if they could meet for coffee. Without Derek, she said yes. He chose a place in Lincoln Park, not their neighborhood, not a place Derek would go, a quiet corner coffee shop with wood tables and the smell of dark roast and someone's dog waiting patiently by the door. Lawson was already there when she arrived. He had ordered for both of them. He stood up when she came in, which was not something he typically did, and she understood immediately that whatever he had to say, he had been carrying it for a while. He was a large man, broad-shouldered, mid-40s, the kind of physical presence that tends to make rooms slightly smaller. He held his coffee cup in both hands and looked at the table. I've been friends with Derek for 19 years, he said. I want you to know that before I say any of this. I know, Meg said. I've also been watching what's happening for a lot longer than just the gala. He looked up. His eyes were direct and uncomfortable in equal measure. I've been trying to figure out when to say something for about 8 months. Say it now, she said. He told her. At 7:15 in the evening on the night of the gala, Lawson had gone to the coat room, the men's coat room, off the main corridor on the 42nd floor. He had gone to retrieve his phone, which he had left in his jacket pocket. Derek had been in there, on the phone. Derek had not seen him. Lawson had started to announce himself, and then had stopped, because what he heard in the first 3 seconds of Derek's voice told him this was not a conversation to interrupt. Derek was talking to someone, his mother, Lawson believed, though he was not certain, and he was saying, if this deal goes through and her name's on it, I'm done. I cannot spend my life being Derek Calloway, Meg's husband. That is not who I am. That is not what I signed up for. A pause, listening. Then, I have to think about my options. Lawson had backed out of the coat room without retrieving his phone. 40 minutes later, in front of 47 people, Derek had said, she used to work in finance. Before. Maybe. 2 hours after that, in the back of a car, Derek had reached for Meg's hand. Meg's coffee cup made a small sound as she set it on the table. He said that, she said, 2 hours before. Yes. My options. Yes. Lawson looked at his hands. I should have said something at the gala. I didn't know how. I've been telling myself I was staying out of it. But I wasn't staying out of it. I was letting it happen. Meg looked at him for a moment. You're saying something now, she said. Yes. That's not nothing. He looked up. Something in his face shifted. Relief and something adjacent to shame and a kind of gratitude that she was not making this worse than it needed to be. They sat with their coffee for a few minutes. Outside, the dog at the door had been joined by a second dog. They appeared to be having a conversation of their own. Meg thought about what she had just learned and what she had already known and how the two things fit together like the two halves of something that had always been one piece. He was never afraid I would fail, she thought. He was afraid I would succeed. He was afraid from the very beginning. From the moment my work became real enough to have a name and a scope and a trajectory. He watched me become someone he hadn't planned on, and he had two responses: contain it and prepare to leave. And the cruel part, the part that takes me a while to say even inside my own head, is that I spent 3 years trying to be worth his pride. I kept making myself slightly smaller so he could feel slightly larger. I deferred the partnership offer. I didn't frame the diplomas. I answered his questions about the salmon and the chicken when my mind was somewhere else entirely. You cannot save something that was threatened by your existence, she thought. That's the sentence. That's the whole of it. She finished her coffee. She said, "Thank you, Lawson. I mean that." He nodded. He looked like a man who had put something down that was heavier than he'd realized. She went home. That evening she told Derek, not with fury, not with the documents on the table, though she had them, not as an attack. She told him in the kitchen, standing at the counter while dinner was on the stove, with the particular quiet of someone who has run out of the energy required to be anything other than direct. "I know about the journalist call," she said. "I know about the joint account. I know about the appointment with the divorce attorney 14 months ago." Derek's first response was immediate. "Where is this coming from? Who have you been talking to?" "A lot of people," she said. "Apparently so have you." "Meg." "I don't want to fight," she said. "I want you to understand something. The deal closed. It's public. My name is on it. Whatever you decide about your options, whatever those options are, I need you to know that I know all of it." He stared at her. Something moved behind his eyes. Then came the thing she had been expecting, the pivot, the redirect, the Darvo that she had learned the word for 6 months ago from an article she had read at 2 in the morning. "You checked out of this marriage the moment Vivian got her hands on you," he said. His voice was even, controlled, the voice of a man constructing a case. "You were never present after that. You were always somewhere else, always working on your project, your deal, your whatever it was. You made me feel like a guest in my own home. You turned into someone I don't recognize. And now you want to stand here and make me into the villain?" She listened. She let him talk. He talked for 4 minutes. She watched his face, and she heard the words, and she filed them away, and she thought, "I know you believe this. I know that this is the story that makes the most sense to you. That you are a man who was left by his wife's ambition. That you are the one who was abandoned. I know that story is real inside you. I also know it is not what happened. When he stopped, I know you believe all of that," she said. "I'm not here to argue about it." She turned off the stove. She left the kitchen. She went to the bathroom and ran a bath. Not the performing, distress kind, not the escape kind, the ritual kind. She lowered herself into the warm water, carefully, the weight of her daughter redistributing, and she sat in the warmth and the steam and the quiet of the room. She was 34 years old. She was 8 months pregnant with her daughter. Her marriage was ending, the largest deal in 11 years of Chicago business history had her name on it. She put both hands on her stomach. The baby moved. The same slow, rolling turn that she had been feeling for weeks. The particular movement that she had come to understand as her daughter's signature. "I know," Meg said, out loud, to the steam and the warm and the room. "We're going to be fine." She believed it. For the first time, completely and without reservation, she believed it. 3 weeks after the gala, the Chicago Business Journal ran its Friday feature. Full page, above the fold of the digital edition. The headline, The $900 million woman. How Margaret Calloway changed Chicago's infrastructure landscape. Her photo. Not the gold dress. A different occasion, 6 months ago, at a Hartwell Group presentation. Vivian beside her. Both of them looking at something outside the frame. Both of them with the expression of women who are thinking about what comes next. The story ran to 4,000 words. It was about the deal, about the negotiation, about the 36 months of development, about what the Ashby-Hartwell partnership would mean for the city's infrastructure over the next decade. Her name appeared 31 times. Derek's name appeared 0 times. Meg read it at her desk on a Friday morning with Clara moving steadily inside her and a cup of tea going cold at her elbow. She read it twice. Then she sat back and looked out the window at the Chicago skyline and thought about nothing for a few minutes. Her phone had been active since the piece went live at 6 a.m. Vivian. Conrad, Thomas, 3 board members she had been hoping to connect with, 2 journalists requesting follow-up interviews, her mother calling from Florida, voice high with an emotion she was trying to contain and not quite managing, and Eleanor Marsh. Not a call, a delivery. White tulips, not lilies, with a small card on plain stationery and a handwriting that looked like a woman who had learned penmanship in an era when it was considered essential. I knew the moment he spoke. The room knew. I'm glad the world is catching up. Meg kept the card. The silver-haired woman from the terrace, Patricia Langdon, she had learned her name finally, retired partner at Langdon and Associates, a woman with 40 years of history in Chicago law, had called Vivian the week after the gala. She had asked if Meg might be willing to have lunch when she was ready, after the baby. There was, Patricia had apparently said, a foundation board she chaired that was looking for someone who understood infrastructure and private sector partnership in a way that was increasingly rare. The world catching up, Meg thought. The truth becoming unhideable. This was the justice she had not known to want. Not Derek's suffering, not a public humiliation to answer a public humiliation. Just the truth, moving at its own pace through the rooms and networks and conversations of a city, arriving everywhere he had tried to prevent it from arriving. Derek was at the lake house. He had been there for 11 days. He had taken a bag and left on a Tuesday afternoon while Meg was at her prenatal appointment. He had texted her, "I need some space to think." She had replied, "Okay." She had called her attorney that afternoon and authorized the next step in the process. There had been no dramatic final argument, no thrown objects, no ultimatums delivered at volume. The marriage had ended the way some things end. Not in catastrophe, but in the long, accumulating evidence of incompatibility, finally too heavy to carry. The financial matters were being resolved. Her attorney was precise and methodical and had, at their first meeting, looked at the documents Thomas provided and said, with professional restraint, he should have hired a better consultant. Mutual friends were recalibrating. This happened without announcement or drama. Paige had always been hers. Lawson had moved to her side in all the ways that mattered. Others were quieter, more careful, the way people become when they realized they may have been participating in a narrative that was not entirely accurate. Sylvia Calloway called once. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. Sylvia said something about grandchildren. She said something about discretion. She said something about family. Meg said, "Clara will always know her grandmother. I'll make sure of that." There was a pause. Then Sylvia said, "You're very composed." "Yes," Meg said. Sylvia did not call again. Meg sat with Paige on a Tuesday evening, 2 weeks after the journal piece, eating takeout soup at the kitchen table. Paige had been there every third night since the hospital. She slept in the guest room and left pastries on the counter and did not ask questions unless Meg was already talking. "How are you actually doing?" Paige said. Meg considered the question. She had been asked it many times in the past 3 weeks, and she had given many versions of the same answer. This time she thought about it seriously. "I feel like I can breathe," she said. Paige looked at her. "That's a strange thing to feel in the middle of a divorce and a complicated pregnancy and the biggest professional transition of my life," Meg said. "I'm aware of that. Not strange," Paige said. "No." Meg set down her spoon. "I spent a long time thinking the goal was to be loved by someone who saw me. What I missed was that I had to see myself first." She paused. "I was waiting for his permission to exist fully. I was 34 years old with a graduate degree and a $900 million deal with my name on it, and I was waiting for permission." Paige was quiet. "The prison door was unlocked the whole time," Meg said. "I was my own warden." Paige reached across the table and covered Meg's hand with her own for a moment. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Outside, the Chicago February had finally broken. The first week of March had arrived with a warmth that felt like an argument being conceded. The windows were dark, but the city lights were bright against the sky. Clara moved. A definitive, insistent movement, the kind she had been producing with increasing frequency in the past week. Meg put her hand on her stomach. "Soon," she said. Labor started on a Thursday morning at 6:47. Not a contraction, a sound. Meg woke to the sound of water. A small, specific sound, a domestic sound completely out of context, and lay in the dark for exactly 4 seconds before understanding what it was. She called Dr. Ann Fielding. Dr. Fielding said, "How far apart are they starting?" "They haven't started yet," Meg said. "My water broke." "Get in the car," Dr. Fielding said. She called Paige. Paige answered on the first ring, despite the fact that it was 6:50 in the morning, which was either testament to their friendship or the fact that Paige had been sleeping with her phone in her hand for the past 2 weeks, in anticipation of exactly this call. "It's time," Meg said. A sound from Paige's end. Not words. Something between a gasp and a laugh. "I'm coming," Paige said. "Do not leave without me." Meg texted Derek. "Labor has started. Northwestern Memorial. You should come." She took a shower. She had read somewhere that this was not recommended and had decided she disagreed. She was calm in the way she sometimes became when something very large was happening, a stillness at the center of motion, the same quality she had felt across the table from Conrad Ashby on a Thursday afternoon 36 weeks ago. She packed her bag. It was already mostly packed. She had been that kind of pregnant, organized, anticipatory, 3 extra copies of the birth plan. Paige arrived at 7:20 in workout clothes, with her hair barely brushed and a bag packed with what appeared to be enough supplies for a medium-length expedition. "You look very calm," Paige said, slightly accusatory. "I am very calm," Meg said. "That's terrifying." They went downstairs. The February morning was trying to be March. A pale warmth in the air, the snow from the previous week retreating toward the gutters. The city smelled like cold concrete and something faintly green, almost possible. In the car, Meg had her first proper contraction at 7:31. She breathed through it. Paige ran a red light. "I told you not to run red lights," Meg said. "I know," Paige said, running another one. At Northwestern Memorial, they were expected. Dr. Fielding had called ahead. The room was ready. Meg was in the hospital gown and hooked to the monitors. By 8:15, the fetal heart rate steady and strong on the screen. The room clean and lit and smelling of the particular medical cleanliness that she had, in the past month, come to associate with her daughter being safe. Vivian Hartwell arrived at 9:15. She came with excellent coffee for Paige and a small bag for the baby. Inside the bag, a receiving blanket in the softest fabric Meg had ever touched, and a Hartwell group onesie so small it looked theoretical. The onesie said nothing on it. It was simply the finest quality cotton available, chosen with the Vivian Hartwell approach to all material things. Not showy, just perfect. Vivienne sat in the chair near the window and opened the newspaper and read without comment. Her presence was exactly right, neither too much nor too little. The presence of someone who intended to be there and had no need to perform the intention. Derek arrived at 9:40. He came in quietly. He had driven from the lake house, 2 hours in early morning traffic, which she had not asked him to do and which he had done anyway. He looked like a man who had not slept well in 11 days. He looked, actually, like someone she had once known very well. "How are you doing?" he said. "Fine," she said. "Good." He sat in the chair on the other side of the bed, not Vivian's chair, his own. He folded his hands on his knees. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "She's your daughter," Meg said. "Of course I told you." They were quiet. Paige was at the window, looking at her phone with the intensity of a woman willing the hours to move faster. Vivian turned to Paige. A contraction came, long and serious, the kind that required full attention. Derek held her hand. She let him. Not because she was forgiving him in that moment, not because anything was resolved or would be resolved for a long time, but because he was the father of her daughter, and because holding on to resentment during labor seemed like a poor allocation of resources, and because she was a woman who had spent 3 years making room for his comfort, and she had learned by now that making room and being consumed were two different things. She breathed through it. The morning moved, contractions, breathing, Dr. Fielding calm and present and professional, Paige who cried twice and pretended she hadn't, Vivian who did not cry but whose newspaper had not advanced a single page in 2 hours. At 11:40, Dr. Fielding said, "Margaret, it's time." At 11:52 in the morning, Clara Vivian Calloway arrived. She came into the world with a sound that was both very small and entirely enormous. Pink and furious, the way new people are, with a face that already looked like it had opinions. Dr. Fielding placed her on Meg's chest and stepped back. The room went quiet in the way rooms go quiet when something irreversible and good has occurred. Meg looked at her daughter. Clara was looking back with the unfocused intensity of a person who has very recently arrived somewhere and is still gathering data. Her face was extraordinary. Her hands were perfect and impossibly detailed, and gripping the air as if testing its resistance. "Hello," Meg said, to her daughter, to the room, to whatever this was. "What's her name?" the nurse asked. Meg looked at Clara for a long moment. She looked at her daughter's face and thought about 36 weeks of carrying her, and 3 years of work, and 1 evening in gold, and the morning in the hospital when she had lain in the dark and heard that steady heartbeat saying, "Here, here, here." She thought about the diplomas on the wall of her office. She thought about the deal memo in her clutch. She thought about the woman who had sat on a marble bench in a lobby and said quietly to no one, "We did it." "Clara Vivian Calloway," she said. Vivian Hartwell, from across the room, made the small sound she made when something had gone exactly right. Derek was crying. She was aware of it without looking at him. A quiet, private grief that was not hers to fix. Clara gripped Meg's finger, hard, like she had been waiting for it. "I know," Meg said. "I know. We're here." 8 months later, October, Chicago. The lake was silver on a Tuesday morning, visible from the corner window of the 31st floor of the Ashby Tower. The building was the same. The floor was the same. The conference room where she had signed the deal memo was 3 doors down the hall. The office she was sitting in was different. It was hers, Callaway-Hartwell Partnership. The nameplate on the door said, which was new, the firm's second naming partner, something Vivian had proposed and Meg had initially declined, and then, on an October morning, with the lake going silver outside her window, accepted. Her name on the door. Clara was in her carrier, on the corner of the desk. This was technically against building policy. The policy had been amended 6 weeks ago, at Vivian's direction, with characteristic Vivian efficiency. A single paragraph added to the employee handbook. No fanfare, no announcement. Clara was asleep. She slept the way she did everything. With full commitment, her face organized into an expression of profound satisfaction. She was 8 months old and had, according to Dr. Fielding, already demonstrated a startling level of what the pediatrician called deliberate engagement with her environment, which Meg took to mean that her daughter was paying attention. She comes by it honestly, Meg thought. The desk was organized the way she liked it. The brief on the left, the correspondence on the right, the personal items in the drawer where they belonged. The diplomas were not in this office. They were in her home office, behind her desk, where she had hung them on a quiet evening 8 months ago. This office had something else on the wall, the deal memo, framed, not the original, Thomas had the original, but a clean copy, matted in white, in a simple black frame. Margaret A. Callaway, lead negotiator. She kept it not as a trophy. She kept it because she had written herself into that document 3 years ago, and because there had been a time when writing her name on something and believing it deserved to be there had taken more courage than she had known she was spending. She was not spending that courage anymore. It had become something simpler. It had become just true. Her assistant knocked and opened the door 2 inches. Ms. Callaway, the Tribune wants a quote for the follow-up piece on the second phase of the Ashby Partnership. Meg was reviewing the preliminary brief on the municipal infrastructure proposal. $700 million, 14 months of initial development. Her team's outline already 40 pages and growing. She considered, tell them the work speaks for itself. It always has. Her assistant nodded and closed the door. Clara made a sound. Not a cry, not distress. The particular small sound she made when she was in the middle of a dream, engaged with something internal and vivid and fully her own. Meg reached out without looking. She set her hand gently on the carrier, the weight of it, the warmth. Clara stilled. Meg turned back to the brief. The lake was silver. The city went on in every direction, an enormous and ordinary and relentless fact. The coffee on her desk was still warm. The morning light was doing what morning light in October does over Lake Michigan, coming in at a low angle, catching things she had stopped noticing years ago, reminding her they were still there. She thought about the gold dress. It was back at Vivian's, returned with a note she had labored over for 20 minutes and finally written in 3 sentences. Thank you for sending it. I understood what you meant. I was ready to understand. She thought about the parking garage. 11 minutes of silence in a car with one hand on her stomach and one on the door handle, letting the nothing be there. She thought about the list on her laptop. What I know, what I don't know. What I do next. The list under what I do next had one word. Wait. She was not waiting anymore. She opened the desk drawer. Not for the deal memo. That was on the wall. She opened the drawer out of habit, the habit she had formed in the weeks after the gala, when she had kept a printed copy of the memo in the drawer of her home office and taken it out sometimes and held it in her hands as a reminder. She had needed the reminder then. She did not need it anymore. She closed the drawer. She picked up her coffee, warm still, which was unusual because she had a habit of forgetting coffee until it was cold. She had been told that having a baby would change her, and it had changed her, but not in the ways people said. She was not softer, or more patient, or less driven. She was, if anything, more certain, more direct, more comfortable with the weight of her own name. Clara made another sound. Shifting now, approaching wakefulness, her face beginning to organize itself from sleep toward the deliberate engagement Dr. Fielding had noted. Meg turned and looked at her daughter. Clara was looking back. 8 months old, with Meg's coloring and her own face, already entirely her own face, with opinions in it that had not come from anyone but herself. Clara looked at her mother with the direct, uncomplicated attention of a person who had not yet learned to look at anything with less than her full self. "Good morning," Meg said. Clara considered this information. Then she smiled. The full, absolute, undisguised smile of someone for whom the world still contained no irony. The smile of someone who had not yet learned to make herself smaller. Meg smiled back. She set the coffee down. She picked up Clara with one arm. She had become very efficient at this, at doing things with one arm while the other held her daughter, and resettled her against her chest. Clara grabbed the collar of her blazer with one small, precise hand and held on. They looked out the window together, the lake, the bridges, the city grid going on forever in every direction, the particular silver of a Tuesday morning in October. Meg thought about an 11-year-old partnership announcement and a baby born in February and a gold dress she had worn because she had earned the right to wear it. She thought about the silver-haired woman on the terrace who had said, "It's going to cost him more than he knows." It had cost him precisely what it was always going to cost him, the chance to be the man who deserved Margaret Calloway. She had stopped grieving that a long time ago. "My name is on it," she thought. "My name has always been on it. I just finally stopped letting anyone convince me otherwise." Clara made a sound of general approval and grabbed more firmly at the blazer. "I know," Meg said. "I know." She had work to do. She sat back down at her desk. She set Clara in the carrier and watched her daughter look at the ceiling with full, deliberate attention. She picked up her coffee. She opened the brief. Her name was on the door. Her name was on the wall. Her name was in every business feed in the city that covered what mattered. 7 hours, $900 million. One gold dress, returned to its owner with a 3-sentence note. One daughter with her own face and her own opinions and a grip that did not let go. She had checked her phone once this morning. Once. Then she had set it down. She had work to do. She had always had work to do. And her name was on it. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to bring you meaningful stories and life lessons, crafted with intention, always.